Hi, everyone. Welcome to Outgrow's Marketer of the Month. I'm your host, Dr. Saksham Sharda. I'm the creative director at outgrow.co. And for this month, we're going to interview Matt Wolfe, who is the co founder of Evergreen Profits, a company that helps set up strategic marketing systems for businesses. Thanks for joining us, Matt.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Great to have you here. And so we're going to start with a rapid fire round just to break the ice. Try to keep your answers to one word or one sentence only.
Sure.
Okay. The first question is, how long does it take you to get ready in the mornings?
2 hours.
Oh, wow. That's the max we've ever heard. Okay.
Well,
How
I have a
many
whole
hours?
routine, so maybe that'll be a question for a different time.
Okay. How many hours of sleep can you survive on?
6.
Okay. Neil Patel or Gary Vaynerchuk?
Gary Vaynerchuk.
Okay. The first movie that comes to your mind when I say the word ambition?
Oh, there's a movie that comes to mind, but I'm drawing a blank on the name. The Pursuit of Happiness.
Okay. The biggest mistake of your career?
I can't think of one off the top of my head.
Okay. No, that's fine. Giving presents or getting presents?
Giving.
Okay. How many cups of coffee do you drink per day?
1.
The most valuable skill you've learned in life?
Persuade.
Persuasion. Okay. Fill in the blank. An upcoming marketing trend is blank.
Wearable technology.
Mm-hmm. And finally, your favorite Tiger King character?
Let's see. What was the main guy's name?
I don't even remember. Joe Exotic. Joe Exotic.
Yeah, Joe
I think,
Exotic.
yeah?
It
Okay,
feels
fair.
like so long ago.
I know, right? I need to update that question with clearly something else. We made this like around the Corona times. But anyhow, that's the end of the rapid fire round. Let's go on to the bigger questions.
Cool.
The first one is, what is a common mistake bloggers often make while starting out?
So when it comes to blogging, I think a lot of people overthink consistency. They overthink how often they need to blog, so they'll put out a lot of junk content to keep up with consistency, as opposed to focusing on fewer quality pieces of content. I'd say that's
Mm.
probably the biggest mistake I see is people go, oh, I want to have a daily blog or a weekly blog, but then they get so consumed by releasing on that schedule that the quality of the content really suffers, and it really does their business no favors.
Yeah, I particularly associate with that. I just find it almost crazy to find people who are like tweeting every day a new blog piece. I'm just like, why? Why is there? I just feel like somewhere in the corner of the internet, there's all this content accumulating, and there's going to be an information glut, a complete information glut. Like historians will have like so much bullshit to go over, I guess. Yeah,
Yeah,
so
yeah. I
yeah,
mean, I think the historians of the future are going to be algorithms and AIs, but
hopefully.
I think you're right.
But that's even worse though, right? Imagine an algorithm assuming that this is exactly what humanity wanted to produce, whereas it was just actually someone trying to produce something at every week or something. I don't know. But interesting. But because I really associate with that. The next question is, what inspired you to build Evergreen Profits? How did there was a need for a company like that?
So Evergreen Profits itself has been this sort of long evolution that's, to use a pretty commonly used term, it's pivoted a lot. So when we first started our business back in about 2007, we were purely just focused on blogging. The whole point of the business was to put out good content. We were in a couple spaces. We had a blog in the personal finance space, and we had a blog in the health and fitness space. I ran more of the finance blog. My partner, Joe Fear, he ran more of the fitness blog. And so in the early days, we were just trying to put out good content. We This was sort of around the time we read the 4 Hour Work Week from Tim Ferriss. We got kind of inspired by his blog. We were reading Ramit Sethi's blog quite a bit, the I Will Teach You to Be Rich blog. And we just both really wanted to put out content. And in the very beginning, it wasn't really something we were thinking about as a business. We kind of just, it was more of a learning tool for us. If I was blogging about personal finance, then inevitably I would learn a lot more about personal finance and get better with my own personal finances. And the same goes on the health
Mhm.
side. The more we blogged about it, the more we researched, and the more we sort of dug down those rabbit holes and sort of taught what we were learning, the better we would get at it ourselves. And that was initially how the business started. But over the years, what kind of happened was, those blogs did eventually monetize, and we did start making money off of them. And one of them we actually sold, and one of them actually to this day still, it is live and is still running. The content is less frequent, but it's still going. And we made money off of these blogs. And so what started happening is friends and peers and family members started asking us more and more about blogging. And we decided, okay, well, let's pivot into education about how we're doing this blogging and this content marketing and all of this stuff we're doing. So we started creating training and another blog about blogging and marketing. And so it sort of evolved into, now we're teaching the blogging and the marketing and how to monetize these websites. And then inevitably it turned into, well, I'll pay you a good amount of money if you just do it for me. So we kind of turned into an agency for a little while, where we were just doing the blogging and the content marketing for people. And there was just this sort of evolution where we we did what we wanted to be doing, and then people came to us and asked us to go to another level with it, and we tacked that onto our business, and it sort of expanded. And then over time we started chopping off the stuff we didn't like doing. We no longer do any agency work or building anything for anybody. Now our focus is, it's almost come full circle again, where all we really focus on now is just putting out good content and being consistent, but being consistent at a very high level of quality. So there's just kind of been that whole evolution, where we started with content marketing, then we started teaching it and doing a whole bunch of it for people, and now we've come all the way back around to where all we really do is focus on content again.
Interesting. And you also do a podcast. What is the best part about being a podcaster, according to you?
Oh, just getting to know a ton of people. I mean, my partner and I, we sort of pride ourselves on our network and the amount of people we know, and the sort of uh, amounts of knowledge we have on tap from the network that we've created through this podcast. When we first started our podcast, I mean, we started podcasting back in 2010, had a little bit of a hiatus, and then started again in 2017. And we've been going consistently 2 episodes a week since January of 2017. So we're pushing 4 years now. So the the network, back when we first started podcasting, we knew, 5 or 6 other entrepreneurs. Joe and I were entrepreneurs ourselves, but we didn't really know a lot of people in the entrepreneurial space. And we had a few friends. We brought those friends on the podcast. They introduced us to other marketers and entrepreneurs and really successful people. And over time, the network just expanded and became this like spider web, to now I feel like there's really nobody almost on earth that I can't get a hold of, because somebody in our network has a connection.
Yeah, I felt that as well. Like, even for our podcast, a lot of them just come from referrals or someone knows someone. So it's like a whole web. That's an interesting way you describe both the podcasting thing and the blogging thing, because it's just building networks and being consistent, right?
Yeah, it's
Any actionable tips for building the right brand with your podcast?
I mean, if you're not interested in the stuff you're talking about, you're not going to keep up
Mm,
with it. So I'd say the number one piece of advice I could give for a podcast is make sure that you're talking about and talking with people that are topics that you're interested in. Early on, when we were first starting to podcast, we were kind of allowing anybody on our show that kind of wanted to be on the show. Anybody who would reach out to us and say, "Hey, I'd love to be on your show," we'd say, "Sure, come on, let's see how it goes." And we ended up getting a lot of sort of really generic podcast episodes, where a lot of our guests were just kind of giving us um like cliches and they were trying to get like their talking points out, but they weren't really giving a
Mm.
lot of like actionable, valuable, amazing information to our guests. So we had to sort of evolve and clamp down over time on who we actually allowed on the podcast, and we had to start creating these filters. So I think that's really, really important. Make sure you're talking about something that you really, really enjoy talking about. And quite honestly, it doesn't need to be something with a big audience. I think a lot of people think, well, I need to have a business podcast or a fitness podcast or, something very general because the audience is bigger. But what we've actually seen in the podcasting space is the more sort of niche down you get with who you're talking to and what you're talking about, the more
Mm.
potential success your podcast has. So, you got to love what you do. You got to sort of filter who you bring on. Don't just bring on anybody. Make sure it's somebody that you think your audience is going to be interested in. And then you know yeah, I think that's probably some of the best advice I can give on getting going with the podcast, because if you're planning on being in it for the long haul, make sure it's something that you love doing.
So, what flow do you have right now for your podcast for choosing someone?
So for the most part, our podcast guests now are either people we already know. So we'll, the people that we've networked with when we go to events or when we go on other podcasts, or the network that we've been creating. We usually invite people that are already in our existing network, or it's a referral from somebody in our existing network. So when somebody reaches out cold, maybe through our contact form, or they find our email on hunter.io or whatever, and they email us and they ask to be on the podcast, most of those emails we just kind of don't even respond to. We get too many of them. I mean, between my partner Joe and I, we probably get about 20 of those types of emails a day of people asking to be on the show. And so those we just don't even have the time to sort of filter through and research the people and see if they make a good fit. So the people that end up on the show are either in our existing network, or they're people that were referred by somebody that we really trust in our network. And really, that's it. I think there's been 2 people on our podcast ever who have reached out cold that we didn't know before we brought them on the show.
Interesting. The next question is, if you could have any guest on your podcast, who would you choose and why?
Let's see. That's a good question. We actually have we have a Dream 100 list, a list of all of the,
Oh,
the people we'd love to have on our podcast. And I think right now our Dream 100 list sits at about 98 people, so we're almost at that full 100 number. For the most part, I feel like everybody that we've really, really wanted to have on the show, we've managed to get on the show. I would say if there's one that I don't think we'll actually be able to get, but I would absolutely love to sit down and have a conversation with him, would be Deval Ravikant.
uh-huh. Okay. And what do you think is the most untapped source of gaining traffic on your blog?
Probably podcasting. I know it's probably a very expected answer from me, who's super immersed in the podcasting world. But the largest growth we've had for our own podcast and for our own business has literally been going on other podcasts like this one, and just having great conversations and sharing what we're all about, and giving bits of wisdom. And ideally, people listen to something like this and go, "Oh, I like the types of things they talk about. I'm going to go check out their show. I'm going to go check out their business." So, quite honestly, going on other podcasts is probably one of the most underrated traffic strategies. I'm a big fan of finding the people that have built audiences, and figuring out how to get in front of existing audiences, and maybe a small percentage of those audiences will migrate over and become part of our audience. So that's really our philosophy these days.
Okay, that's interesting. And do you think there are too many podcasts out there? Or do you think how much is the market saturated with podcasts, do you think?
I think I don't think it's saturated really at all, especially the more niche you get, there's
Mm.
less and less saturation. But if you look at podcasting, I think we just passed the million podcast threshold, where there's like something like a million podcasts out there now. Um, but when you look at blogs, there's like, I don't know the exact numbers.
Yeah.
I'll be speaking off the top of my head, but there's tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of blogs out there. So when you kind of compare blogging to podcasting, podcasting is not even close to where blogging is, right? There's still a lot of open space there. And then when it comes to like actually niching down your podcast and speaking to a very sort of ideal avatar, then it opens up even more. And I think as long as you're not trying to be the next Joe Rogan podcast where anything goes, you just talk about whatever's on your mind. Those podcasts are really, really, really hard to succeed unless you're somebody that has an existing platform before starting the podcast. You know, guys like Joe Rogan and Dax Shepard and Tim Ferriss and some of these examples of guys that kind of will talk about almost anything on their show. Well, they had massive platforms before they ever hit record on their first podcast episode.
I was going to ask you, so what are some of the podcasts that you like listening to?
So I actually don't listen to many business related podcasts. I do enjoy the Joe Rogan show from time to time. If he's got an interesting guest on, I like to listen to that. I think Dax Shepard has a really good podcast, The Armchair Expert. I actually listen to a lot of podcasts where it's sort of celebrities interviewing other celebrities, which, you know, is, I don't know why. It's just that's kind of what I'm into. I think a lot of those people are really, really good interviewers. So I'm almost listening more to hone in my interview skills and see how these people are interviewing people more so than like how the guests actually respond to the questions. When it comes to sort of the business marketing podcasts, there's a few that I really like. There's one called Business Lunch with Roland Frazier. I'm good buddies with Roland, and I really, really enjoy his podcast. There's one, Mike Dillard's podcast is a really good one. I think it's just called The Mike Dillard Show. I'll tune into Tim Ferriss's show from time to time. If he has a guest that really interests me, I'll probably listen to 1 in 10 of his episodes.
Mm.
Yeah, that's. I mean, I listen to about. I'll make it through about one podcast episode every 3 days, because I'll
Oh.
be listening to podcasts while I'm out walking my dog or I'm doing a workout or something. I'll listen to podcasts during these sort of small windows that I get during the day. So, an hour and a half, 2 hour, all the way up to like 3 hour podcasts like Joe Rogan's show. Some of these shows will take me, 3 days to a week just to finish one episode. So I don't listen to a ton of podcasts. I listen to a few episodes of a few shows.
Hmm. So there's not anyone that you religiously follow?
Not that I can think of. No, not really. Oh, the Conan O'Brien podcast he's probably the one that I listen to almost every episode he puts out because I think they're
Mm.
hilarious. But I don't know if there's a lot of benefit from a business marketing perspective of listening to his show.
Okay. And how do you think podcasting compares to vlogging?
I mean, I think they're slowly merging together. I think
Mm.
a lot of people call their vlog and their YouTube channel their podcast, and a lot of podcasters now are recording video. With our show for the first 3 years of recording, first 2.5 years, we never recorded video for any of our podcasts. We just did pure audio, and then we brought in a guy to help run some ads for us, and we brought in somebody to manage a YouTube channel for us. And because we brought in those two guys, they started asking us to shoot video and record podcasts. So now all of our podcasts actually get repurposed into YouTube videos. So I really kind of feel like they intersect, and they're slowly merging together. I think in the truest sense, a podcast is really audio only. But I think a lot
Mm.
of people are starting to use the terms more interchangeably. And I think we're just going to kind of see them merge. Podcasters are shooting more video, and vloggers are, you can repurpose your audio from your video blog as a podcast. And I don't know, over time, I think they're just becoming more and more one and the same.
Yeah, we've sometimes used just snippets from the videos from a video podcast to just like run on Facebook to get people interested in the podcast. But yeah, that's the only time we'd use it. What do you think is the ideal length for a podcast,
I
if
don't
there is
really,
one, if there
yeah,
can be one?
I don't really think there's an ideal answer to that. I think, as deep as the conversation needs to be to provide value to your audience, which is probably not the answer that anybody listening would want to hear. But if you bring on somebody that's breaking down a very specific business tactic, and they can break down that entire tactic in a 15-minute episode, I don't think it's entirely necessary to make a 2-hour episode where only 15 minutes of it is the value that that person was, bringing to the audience, right?
Mm.
You see that a lot with books, where you have like a 250-page book, but the sort of thesis of the book could be summed up in a paragraph, but they write a whole book around this one paragraph. I think the same can go for podcasting. There's some people that we've had on our show that are just so fascinating and have so many good ideas and so many good thoughts, and every question we ask they just have amazing answers for, that we end up having 2-hour episodes with those people. And then we have some people that come on the show that are just very matter of fact. Here's what I do, here's how we break it down, here's the process that you can follow, and the whole episode's done in 20 minutes. Who's to say which one is more valuable to people? One is an amazing conversation with a ton of gold nuggets in it. One is a very succinct tactic that somebody could go and listen to and apply quickly. So I really think it's almost too subjective of a question to have a
Mm.
very specific answer to.
I was just like, one is a lot of gold nuggets in it, and the second one is like a gold brick that's just thrown at your face at the beginning in like the first 15 minutes. I'm like, pithy, basically.
Exactly.
What are the best platforms then? What are the best platforms you've felt for your podcast? Like, what do you think are the good platforms to launch a podcast on?
So when you say platform, what do you mean by that? Can you be a little
Apple
more?
Podcasts, Spotify. Where do you put the podcasts?
So the way we do it is our podcasts go on Libsyn, which is our
Hmm.
hosting company for the podcasting, and then Libsyn essentially distributes it to all of those places. So it'll go out to Apple, it'll go out to Spotify, Stitcher, Overcast, all of the major platforms. The podcast goes out to them. As far as what I listen to podcasts on, I love listening to podcasts on Overcast.
Mm.
That's my favorite platform to listen on. As far as promoting the podcast and sort of steering people where they should listen, we usually tell people, if you're on an Apple device, go listen on Apple. If you're on a Google device, go listen on Spotify. So we're usually kind of dividing the people between Apple and Spotify for the most part.
Okay, fair. And final question, if you had to choose between blogging and podcasting, which one would you choose?
Hands down, podcasting. It comes so much more naturally and easy to me, right? It's a lot easier for me to jump on a
Mm,
phone call and have a 30-minute to 60-minute conversation, and that is the content created, right? Like, we jump on the calls. We have a couple team members that get those recordings and do all the editing and uploading and all that kind of stuff. But as far as the work that we put into the podcast ourselves, me and my co-host Joe, we jump on the calls, we record the calls, we put the files in Dropbox, and then everything
mm,
else is just kind of handled. When it comes to blogging, I mean, one blog post might take me 2 weeks to write, because I'm spending a whole bunch of time doing an initial outline, and then I'll go through and do a whole bunch of research on the topic so I can cite other, quote other sites and things like that. And it's so much. I feel like a well-written blog post is more fulfilling than a great podcast episode, but a great podcast episode is so much quicker and easier to
yeah,
produce and to consistently maintain.
fair, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, I think that was the last question us for this month's episode of Outgrow's Marketer of the Month. That was Matt Wolfe, who is the co-founder of Evergreen Profits. Thanks for joining us, Matt.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Had a lot of fun.
Do check out their website and podcast for more details, and we'll see you once again next month with another Marketer of the Month.